During the age of the Renaissance, on to the 18th century, into the Enlightenment, women began progressively gaining power in society. The Renaissance was a time of change in Europe. Scholars became interested in learning about literature, architecture, art, etc. These scholars became known as humanists who were in search of lost knowledge. Humanists thought that by finding this knowledge, people's lives would transform. This resulted in an era of learning and transformation that affected both women of the working class and of the ruling class. Women of the working class didn't receive a proper education. Their mothers taught them from their homes. They learned various skills such as raising livestock, making cheese, bread, beer, etc. Eventually, the young women could grow up and begin their own businesses in making beer or cheese and so on. Women of the ruling class learned from their homes as well, but were taught by tutors that were mostly humanists. Women of the ruling class had more of an opportunity to express themselves, but not adequately. Women's role in society certainly progressed during the Renaissance and even proceeded further during the Enlightenment. The age of the Enlightenment was an intellectual movement beginning in Europe and taking place from the 17th to the 18th century. Women during this period found ways to contribute to society through new literary forms. This resulted in a development of women authors that began to increase over time. The British writer Mary Wollstonecraft is considered to be the first feminist in Western Europe. In her novel, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, with strictures on political and moral subjects, she argues that women should receive the same level of education as their social standing so they can serve as intellectual companions to their husbands. Later in the 18th century, other laws were passed which advanced the rights and equality of women. In 1857, women were able to divorce their husbands that left them or were cruel to them. In 1870, women could keep the money they had earned themselves. In 1891, women could not be forced to live with their husbands if they did not want to. In the later years of the 19th century, women wanted one very basic right, the right to vote. This was firmly known as the right of suffrage, and the group that fought for this right became known as suffragettes. It wasn't until 1928 women were given the same political rights as men. At the start of the 20th century, women were still considered outsiders to politics, such as voting, serving on juries, holding elective office. Women were victims of extensive discrimination and were considered secondary citizens. Over the course of the century, women in America have moved intensely into all aspects of public life: politics, mass media, profession, pop culture, etc. However, still in modern day, women and men are still not equal. For instance, women still have less status than men in the business world. Very few women are in high executive positions and are considered unfit to be in such a position. Women that do manage to climb their way up to the top then have problems being respected by their colleagues. Women's status in society is still changing to this day and can continuously be analyzed.